Okay, welcome back everyone. It is 7/24 of 2015. We have an opportunity with chapter 5 of the book of James to think like Easterners, but to keep our rich Greek heritage of the Greek language. So we really want to keep the best of both worlds. We want to think like Jews. We want to keep our conceptual heritage of the Greek, rich, in-depth Greek language. So if we keep both of those, if we keep that Greek attitude and that Hebrew attitude and that Greek language, those two together can help us to work through this chapter 5, which is very Eastern in its teaching and expressed in Greek concepts. So we want to grasp ideas like prayerful meditation and the repetitious recital of Psalms. Very Eastern ideas, very Hebrew-type practices in the temple and practices in the Judaic faith, which are a part of the Christian heritage. And we don't really practice meditation very much in Christianity. We don't practice repetition of the Psalms. We don't practice real intercessory meditation. We don't practice our Judaic heritage. But we do love the Greek language. We love our Western heritage of the Greek conceptual depth, the rich field of conceptual language. We thrive in that. I know I thrive in that. But I do not practice a recital of Psalms. I don't practice meditation over, very long periods of time. And my prayer is very distinctly Western type prayer. It's not the Eastern Judaic Hebrew type meditative type prayer and recital of Psalm, repetitions of Psalms, like you see the Hebrews doing today along the north wall that still remains of the old temple in Jerusalem. They will repeat over and over again Psalms and doxologies that they repetitively will recite in prayer and meditation at the wall. And it is a holy site and an iconic site for the Hebraic faith. We, however, as Western Christians, do not really take up the Hebrew concept of prayer and meditation. We have a very distinct Western way of prayer, which is not at all the way that began with our Jewish heritage. We need to try to recapture that in chapter 5 of the book of James. At the same time, we want to look at the very rich and a very deep language of the Greek language. After all, the New Testament was expressed in Koine Greek, and there's a reason for that. It is a very deep, very pictorial language. It gives us great images and great depth of understanding. We want to cherish that Greek language, but we want to understand that the Hebrews did meditate, and they did have long, prayerful, meditative sessions, and they did practice the recital of Psalms, and they did look very much like Easterners. They looked very much like someone we would associate with, say, Buddhism. And that's very alien to our Western mind to think of Buddhism. We think, we almost many right-wing Christians think very negatively toward Buddhism, but there's nothing wrong with spiritual ideal goals and practices, and they are very much a part of the Judaic faith. The Jews practiced a recital of Psalms, which is almost a form of chanting. They practiced very long meditative sessions, extremely long enduring meditative sessions. Prayer was not simply supplication over a very brief amount of time. They practiced very long meditations in the temple. They practiced psalm recitals. Keep that in your mind as we go through this chapter 5, and we're going to look at it from an Eastern point of view, but we're going to celebrate the Greek conceptual depth. So it's going to be an Eastern approach within a Western Greek language. And we're going to look at the 3 moments of James the Just teaching. And he was a Rabbi-Master. He was a high priest. He went all the way to the highest level of training in the Judaic faith. He was a Rabbi-Master. And this teaching is distinctly a three-part teaching, which is almost a direct correlation to what is taught in Buddhism, and that is negate and get away from attachment, definitude, escape that attachment, practice meditation, and then reach freedom, or what we call in Christianity, sozo, salvation. So we're going to look at the three moments of attachment as the negative to be negated. Then we're going to pass through meditation, which in Christianity we call prayer, but for the Judaic faith, it was long meditative sessions. And then finally we're going to look at sozo salvation as a salvation of freedom. So we're going to look at the Buddhist teachings of attachment, meditation, and freedom. Attachment, meditation, and freedom. We're going to look at those within the Eastern point of view, but by relying on the Greek conceptual depth of language in chapter 5 of the book of James. So let's take a look at our Rabbi Master and see what he has to say. He begins by saying that the leadership of the community in these Greek cities, they have formed an attachment to storing up gold as their possession for their latter years. They're kind of like saving up for their the end of their life. And he uses the word thesaurizo, and thesaurizo is going to be our Greek concept for that negative idea of attachment to finite things, attachment to the sensate world. Thesaurizo is attachment. It says you're practicing this thesaurizo of storing up and being attached to possessing money, to possessing gold, all to make sure that you ensure your wealth during your end years. But he says, whenever we try to possess the finite, we will become seis bibrasco, which means moth-eaten. Those possessions are going to be moth-eaten. They're going to rot away. They're going to be tarnished. Anything of finitude, anything of the sensate realm, is that which passes away. It is not eternal. It is not spirit. It is corrupt. It will be moth-eaten, rotted, and it will eventually tarnish. And then he brings up the third point of judgment. He says this storing up type of attachment, this thesaurizo, becomes a judgment against you, against your true self as spirit. It becomes a martyrion, or an evidence of judgment against you. And it, phago, consumes your true spirit. This sensate thesaurizo of attachment is destructive of true spirit. And it will result in existing in a state of tala eporia, or calloused condition. You will end up with a very calloused, hardened heart. Now he goes on from there to point out that this first sin of thesaurizo has led to another sin of acting fraudulently against the employees that these leaders are employing in their fields and in their businesses. He says your greed of possession, this thesaurizo, has resulted in your defrauding your employees of their wages. You have actually, apostorio, you have actually defrauded your workers of their wages. And then he says you did this just for your own selfish indulgence. You did it to fatten yourself with more possessions, to live luxuriously, to live riotously. All you've wanted to do is fatten your own heart of the hedone type nature that we've already discussed. You're magnifying this hedone nature. You are magnifying hedone by becoming thesaurizo, possessive and attached to the finite sensate world. You have entered into a sin of attachment, of thesaurizo. It has resulted in this evidence of judgment being accumulated against you and destroying your spirit. So they actually have fattened up this heart of hedone, and he says this selfishness is actually, it condemns righteousness, and it has caused the death of some of your own workers. He actually has driven, poverty was already a problem, but this employer has actually shortchanged his employees so much that they can't even sustain themselves, and he's actually caused the death of some of his own workers. And so there has been a condemnation brought against him for this type of an action, which is a destruction of the dikaios, that which is righteous. And these leaders have actually entered into the sin of murder, of phanuo. So they've actually murdered, they're guilty of murder, because to deprive someone of their essential needs through fraud, through defrauding them, is essentially murder. He says you have actually taken lives because of your own selfish thesorizo, covetousness, and desire to cling and attach yourself to the finite, sensate world. You become a destroyer of righteousness, a destroyer of spirit. And he says these acts of hedone, this hedone nature, are actually stored up against you by the Lord of hosts. Now the Lord of hosts is the description of the lordship of the divine as the Lord of innumerable armies. So it is a very judgmental type depiction and description of the Kyrios lordship of Christ. But these actions are being stored up as the evidence of judgment against them by the Lord of hosts, or the Lord of innumerable armies of judgment. So the first part of chapter 5 is entirely about the sin of attachment. It is about the horrible evolution of that hedone nature that we already discussed. We already discussed hedone quite a bit, but hedone nature has resulted in a additional inward subjective stance of thesorizo, of attachment and possession. They are so attached to the finite world, they are so attached to the sensate world, that they are destructive. They are destroying the spiritual. They're destroying human life, and they're destroying the pure and the righteous realm of the kingdom. Now the second moment is going to address James's teaching on the answer to this sin of attachment. How do we overcome attachment? That's going to be the issue addressed in the second moment. He begins in the second moment by saying that they need to be patient toward the promised coming of the Lord. The advent of the returning Christ has drawn near, and Christ actually stands ready at the door of Advent. The promised return of Christ is an impending reality. It is a reality of Christ at the door in any moment. Judgment is at the door in every moment of our life. And then he says, recall the Torah, take up the Torah, and look at the words of the prophets. And they have expressed to be patient toward true spiritual reward from the divine, and to abstain from this attachment to the sensate world and its rewards, which just result in destruction. So take up the Torah and read about the words of the prophets that emphasize the true spiritual reward, the prophetes, the prophets, who implored to the readers to practice patience, makros thumos, practice makros thumos, and practice it from proimos to opsimos. Proimos to opsimos. Practice a long suffering patience from the very first moment of an event to the very last moment of an event. Endure through the entire event process with a long suffering patience in every situation, in every temporal event, in every temporal extension of every temporal event. And then he points to Job as an example, and he says, this enduring will strengthen your heart in the same way that Job was strengthened to discover the Lord's teleology of mercy. So sterizo cardia, Fix your heart firmly on spiritual enduring, starizo-cardia. And by doing so, like Job, you will acquire a knowledge of the telos, kuriou, polos, splagnon, which is a teleosis of the bountiful compassion of the Lord God. In other words, there's an eschatological teleology present of spirit, and the spiritual dimension, I've mentioned many times before, it is an eschatological trajectory that exists in our finite sensate world, that those who have the spiritual instruction can see this spiritual dimension, but the eschatological trajectory of that spiritual realm is toward sozo, salvation. It's toward compassion. It's toward forgiveness. It's toward healing. And so we're to take up Job's example, and through this very patient fixing of our heart on spiritual enduring, we will become aware of the teleology or the teleosis of this bountiful compassion of the plan of salvation that has been planted in creation from day one. From day one of creation, this plan of sozo salvation has been planted, and it will be brought to its fruition. It will be brought to its end, and we are to patiently endure toward this eschatological end. We are to fix our hearts, starizo-cardia, on a markos thumos of long-suffering patience. So we couple together starizo-cardia and makros thumos. Fix your heart on this long-suffering patient endurance. Now it gets to the key teaching now in 12 through 16. This is going to be the key teaching from the Rabbi-Master James. Inwardly possess not false oaths. Don't take up false oaths as your attitude, but take up pure intentionality. Let your heart be of a pure intentionality. Let it be a pure yes and a pure no in all that you do. Make your heart an enclosure for a pure intentionality. So he's given his readers, his listeners, two imperatives. Take up long suffering, fix your heart. Starizo-cardia, fix your heart on long suffering, and starizo-cardia, fix your heart on pure intentionality. So he brings it to the forefront here, and he says, outwardly, therefore, from this inward nature, you need to add to the patient enduring and the pure intentionality, add the following. And he says, add pros euchomai, which is the prayerful meditation, which would be familiar to those of the Judaic faith as true meditation, not prayer like we view prayer in the Western world, but they would be aware that James is saying and demanding that they take up these long, prayerful, meditative ministries. They're to take up pros euchomai, prayerful meditation, and it's long and it's enduring, and it actually is a divine interaction. This is meditative interaction. This isn't a prayer of supplication that we were kind of used to in the West. No, this is a meditative divine interaction. A divine meditative interaction is pros euchomai. So to patient enduring and pure intentionality add pros euchomai meditation. And then add pros kaleo, intercession on the behalf of others. Our meditation will also include intercession on behalf of others. And then here's something that we do not practice at all, except some of the Jews at the Western Wall in Jerusalem, and that is to sing the rhythmic psalms, which is a type of chanting. It's repetitive, but repeat the rhythmic psalms in a prayerful, meditative type way. So it's a salo. So we're to take up pros euchomai, pros kaleo, and salo. We're to take up meditation, intercession, and rhythmic repetition of psalms. And so if you add that all together, James says, we are to practice as Christians with a Judaic faith. We've forgotten these. We are to take up patience, pure intention, true meditation and intercession, and the repetition of psalms. That's very Eastern, That's extremely Eastern in its teaching, but as Westerners, we have certainly need to learn that and reaffirm our Judaic and Hebrew faith. We're to take up patience, pure intention, meditation, and intercession, and the repetition of Psalms. When we do this, James says there will be a result of a spiritual concrete result. We will see concrete results. They will be spiritual, but they will be very visible as concrete results. There will be sozo, healing. There will be egairo, lifting of spirit. There will be aphemi, forgiveness, and there will be eomai, spiritual cleansing. Healing, lifted spirit, forgiveness, and spiritual cleansing. All of those things are spiritual, but they are concrete. Now that's not difficult to put together if you just really think that through, but the spiritual can be concrete. It can be the true, the real. If we perceive and posit our reality that way, those who can see spiritually know that the true and the real is not the sensate world that we attach to, but it's the world that we see behind or enclosing that sensate realm, that eschatological directed spirit. That's the true, that's the real concrete, that's the true, that's the actual. Now James closes out in his teaching by saying that intercession and prayer will result in that sozo salvation type freedom. And the supreme work of intercession is to bring someone back from any erring in truth and to realign them with spirit. The entire book has been about misalignment. If you remember all of the previous lessons, James is talking about misalignment. They've lost their alignment with spirit. There's a real sin going on here. There's a real problem going on here of misalignment. And it has been expressed through this thesorizo in chapter 5. He says part of that misalignment is thesorizo clinging and possessiveness and an attachment to the sensate world. But the ultimate work of intercession will be to bring someone back from that misalignment and to realign them with spirit, to realign them with the aletheia spiritual truth. So to epistrepho anyone, to return someone to alignment with spiritual truth, that's the best intercessory work you can do. In addition to that, he says that Elijah possessed the same spirit, human nature that we all possess. He possessed the same fallen spirit, the same tendency toward hedone, the same tendency toward thesorizo. Elijah himself possessed that same fallen nature, but he learned prayerful meditation. He had the homeos pasco, the same nature as we have, but he learned proseuchomai, prayerful meditation. So again, take up the Torah. Look back to Elijah, who had the same fallen nature we all have, but he learned prayerful meditation. He learned how to transcend that hedone spirit, how to transcend hedone, to eliminate that daisuke dual-mindedness, that dual-souledness of daisuke that James has already talked about in the last lesson. We can overcome this daisuke, this split nature of hedone and pneuma, and negate that hedone and take up pneuma spirit. We need to center ourselves in spirit and negate hedone, which has become thesorizo. Negate thesorizo and take up pneuma spirit, and in that way destroy this daisuke split nature that you possess. This split nature is destructive. It's destroying you. If you can negate that daisuke split nature, if you can eliminate this thesorizo clinging attachment, your hedone nature, and take up spirit through meditation, long suffering and enduring meditation, you will reach sozo psuche, which is the saving of the soul, and also kalupto hamartia, which is the realignment with the spiritual and a correction of being off the mark. Hamartia is missing the mark. So that being off the mark of spirit will be corrected if you can take up this intercession, if you can take up patience, pure intention, meditation, intercession, repetition of Psalms, if you can take up these imperatives the outward practice that he's demanding of patience, pure intention, meditation, and intercession, and the repetition of psalms. Take these up, and you can overcome this daisuke split nature. You can overcome and negate the hedone, which is a thesaurizo type clinging to the sensate and a desire to possess the sensate. We need to negate that through meditation and reach sozo, salvation, or freedom. So tremendous, great teaching from the Rabbi Master James, and that will